Welcome to the video, guys. You might remember me covering the absolute disaster that has been the European Union's response to the current crisis we find ourselves in, with them spending the last 2 months arguing about how they are going to bail each other out. So far, they have announced 1.6 trillion in bailout funds, though, as far as I can tell, they haven't actually paid out a single penny. 500 billion is due to be paid out on the 1st of June, which is like 3 months after this situation started, making the EU a complete laughingstock. Imagine having to wait 3 months for financial help. All the while, the European Union runs around claiming its shit don't stink. And as we see over here, from the Ramonas who constantly promote it like it's the most progressive and unified bloc, when the coronavirus crisis has actually shown it to be a complete, unmitigated disaster that has the unity and cohesion of a war-torn country. Well, yesterday, France and Germany proposed another €500 billion recovery fund, likely as a way to try and claw back some unity amongst the bloc because, as we all know, it's currently at risk of completely fracturing and breaking apart, with possibly a few nations leaving the bloc in short order if it carries on the way it is. Now, the BBC reported on this recovery fund yesterday with some optimism, thinking that it would actually work, when in actual fact, reports out today suggest that multiple European nations have actually rejected this recovery fund, saying France and Germany don't have the right to decide on things like this. In talks on Monday, French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel agreed that the funds should be provided as grants. The proposal represents a significant shift in Mrs. Merkel's position. Mr. Macron said it was a major step forward and was what the Eurozone needs to remain united. As I said, they're trying to push for some unity because, as we all know, it's a complete disaster at the moment. I believe this is a very deep transformation, and that's what the European Union and the single market needed to remain coherent, Mr. Macron said, following discussions via video link. Ms. Merkel, who had previously rejected the idea of nations sharing debt, said the European Commission would raise money for the fund by borrowing on the markets, which would be repaid gradually from the EU's overall budget. Grants provided by the proposed recovery fund should also be used to help finance the bloc's investment in a greener future, the two leaders said. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on her back said the proposal acknowledges the scope and the size of the economic challenge that Europe faces. ECB President Christine Lagarde said the plan was ambitious, targeted and welcome. Other EU countries must agree with the proposal, however, and Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz later insisted that his country backed providing loans to member nations hard hit by the coronavirus pandemic, rather than grants, which, like I said, shows the EU has no unity and no real power to actually get anything done. It's not only the Austrians who are against these coronavirus grants and instead want to make them loans because I guess money talks and bullshit walks, which is reported here in the Express. EU crisis. Macron-Merkel told they don't have final say as €500 billion rescue plan hits the wall. Under the blueprint, the EU would raise €500 billion on financial markets as we know and distribute the cash across the bloc to the regions who are most hit. French President Emmanuel Macron said member states would contribute to the fund in their economic might. As the EU's largest economy, Berlin would be expected to sign the biggest check, which, if we was in there, we would have been expected to sign the biggest or second biggest check, that you can be sure. Luckily, we are not, and by the sounds of it, they are not trying to work it in with the transition period. The bloc's next 7-year budget would be used to collect and distribute the funds. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said, "We need a colossal effort and we are ready to make it. We are taking a new road for a crisis that is without precedent." Mr. Macron insisted the new fund would be distributed by grants and ruled out asking recipients to pay them back, which it seems a few nations have a really big problem with, and has now threatened to completely derail this grant. He said this is a transfer of real budget money to the worst affected regions and worst hit sectors. The plan has put the two influential nations who have secured the support of EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on her back on a collision course with some member states. The bloc's traditionally financial prudent capitals have expressed concern that they weren't properly consulted. They said they would oppose the use of grants rather than low-cost loans being distributed as part of the rescue plan. Because obviously they must want to make some of this money back, which, I suppose, can you really blame them? A Dutch government spokesman warned France and Germany they did not have the final say in the distribution of funds. Prime Minister Mark Rutte's spokesman said, ultimately the European Commission has yet to come up with a proposal. Oh, imagine my shock at that. All these EU shitweasels running around talking about how great the European Union is, and I've even seen a few of them saying about how they've sorted out their financial problems in relation to the coronavirus pandemic, when in actual fact, this article suggests they haven't sorted out anything because the European Commission has yet to come up with a proposal, and the only money they've got, like I said, coming on the 1st of June, is from an existing mechanism that they started speaking about, 2 months ago? It's a complete joke and shows what a piss-poor shitshow the EU actually is. The Austrian Chancellor suggested he would oppose the blueprint, as we know, which requires the unanimous backing from all EU leaders unless funds are only dispersed by loans. Which, by the time it's all said and done, is likely how this is going to go, because the EU has no power if one of them decides we ain't going along with it. And by the sounds of it, there could well be more than one of them doing that. He said, our position remains unchanged. We are ready to help the most affected countries with loans. We expect the updated EU budget to reflect the new priorities rather than raising the ceiling. Mr. Kurz held talks with Mr. Rutte and the leaders of Denmark and Sweden last night after the rescue plan was announced. They are all likely to oppose the grants and block increases to their EU budget liabilities. Can you actually blame them? And what a surprise, the EU are once again after more money from the member states and the people of those respective countries. Rather than all arguing amongst yourselves, why don't you all grow some spine and leave the European Union to crumble and die as it should? Finland is also expected to bugger it off because they ain't interested, I don't blame them. Mrs. Merkel hinted that the Franco-German plan could still be scuppered by member states. She said, we are making our partners a proposal. I think it will help to reach consensus in the EU 27. But I don't know about you, Merkel, it certainly doesn't look like it to me, given what people are saying about it over in the EU. And all this goes back to what we was talking about recently in regards to Italy leaving the EU. Most of their citizens already want to leave the bloc, and it seems many Europhiles are now suggesting that it might actually be the best thing for them. Obviously, the motives of some of these people will need to be questioned, but it's almost common knowledge the world over now that Italy would be better off outside the European Union like it was before, as would, I expect, most countries within the shit show that we call the bloc. But this Express article headlines, Italy warned it could face Eurozone exit as coronavirus crisis deepens. Italy should seek help from its own wealthy citizens rather than relying on Germany and other EU countries to bail it out as it struggles to bounce back from the coronavirus pandemic, a former MEP and economist has warned. Hans Olaf Henkel suggested the best solution would be for Italy to leave the Eurozone and go back to their own currency, which he dubbed the new lira. Mr. Henkel was speaking against the backdrop of widening splits between the north and south of the bloc, as we've just seen, and particular Germany and Italy, on how best to mitigate the economic and societal impacts of the virus. Now, obviously, you have to question these people's motives, but in principle, I would agree with him, as I've said many times before. Manfred Weber, leader of the European People's Party in the European Parliament, became the latest figure to speak out, calling for strict controls to prevent Italy and Spain embarking on massive public spending sprees using EU cash. Mr. Henkel was also responding to comments by billionaire Europhile George Soros. Oh, imagine my shock that he is involved somewhere, who last week suggested the EU had a duty to help Italy, which has been harder hit by the disease than anywhere else in the bloc. by spreading the cost of rebuilding the country's economy among members of the Eurozone, rather than letting Italian politicians borrow money from and at the risk of other countries. Germany should make a generous gift in exchange for Italy leaving the Eurozone and go back to their own currency. This way, Italy's central bank could devalue their currency to become competitive again, get their economy back on its own feet, and prosper like Italy did before the euro. Now, I don't know how realistic that is, I am not an economist, but I would certainly agree with the Italians leaving the euro and moving back to their own currency, as I would with every nation in the European Union. But in summing up, I have got to say this is not looking good for the EU as a whole. Still can't agree on money or bailouts or anything even related to it, and people now calling for Italy to leave, along with, of course, their citizens. How much longer can this block actually last? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments as always. Now before I go, I've started doing live streams and uploading gaming content on my second channel. If you would like to come and join me for a live stream to chat in real time, have an interest in gaming related content on YouTube, or just want to follow me over there because you are a legend, the link will be down in the video description below and as a pinned comment. I hope to see you all there. Now as always, before I go, I want to thank our PayPal, Patreon, Subscribestar and YouTube members for supporting the channel, along with everyone who watches my videos. Remember to let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Leave a like, subscribe with the notification bell and share this video as it helps the channel a lot. And I will see you all in the next one.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors. Slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires. And that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going and we are glad to be going. We're off.